Well, joining me now live from Shropshire is the Conservative MEP and famous Eurosceptic, Daniel Hannan. There's no excuse, is there, for the Prime Minister not knowing this was going to happen? It's based on British figures. The Chancellor knew on Tuesday. What's he so surprised about?
I think there's no excuse for having sprung the thing in this way. Nobody really saw it coming. But I think, Christian, you're onto something. I mean, you can decide that we're members of this thing properly and accept that, infuriating as this is, it's plainly within the rules. Or you can seek a different relationship with the European Union. What you can't do is stay in and then complain about everything. That's petulant, it's unmanly, and it's counterproductive. It makes us resented in Europe and it makes us distrusted at home.
I mean, Britain got a payment back in 2008. Now it's being asked for a surcharge. I mean, that's the way the rules work, isn't it?
Well, hang on. We have been net contributors in 40 out of 41 years of membership. The only year that was the exception, interestingly enough, was 1975, when we had the referendum. We're massively clobbered by the common external tariff because we're the only EU member state that trades more outside the EU than with the other member states. We're clobbered by the common agricultural policy because we have a relatively small but efficient farming sector, so we pay more in and we get less out. We are always in a position of being large net contributors. And these sums, by the way, are huge. You know, 1.7 billion, which is just the extra, not the total amount, just the extra. That's enough to pay for 60,000 nurses and their pensions. It's more than is raised by the whole bank levy. So we're talking really serious money here. This isn't just some symbolic thing about being annoyed.
But as you say, I mean, this is stuff we've known year in, year out. I'm just wondering whether this outrage is a bit manufactured for the Rochester and Stroud by-election.
You know, I think it's slightly diminishing the thing to talk about whether it's just to do with one by-election or whether it's just to do with the relations between the parties. I think the EU has given us 1.7 billion very good reasons to seek a different kind of relationship. The Swiss, Norwegians, they have complete access to European markets, but they don't have to pay anything like this. The Swiss pay something like 4% per capita what we pay, because of course they're not part of the programs. You know, they're not part of the CAP, they're not part of the common foreign policy. I think that's a position that would be much closer to what the people of Britain want. It would have been nice to have been able to get it by renegotiation, but it's now clear that the only way to get there is by leaving and negotiating from the outside, as the Swiss have done.
The strange thing, though, is that as the voices for exit grow louder and UKIP do better, British opinion seems to be more firmly than ever in support of staying in Europe. The Ipsos Mori poll this week showed support for staying in Europe at its highest point since 1960. I mean, it might be possible, might it not, that UKIP does very well in Britain, but support for staying in Europe stays high.
Sure, that's a possibility. I don't know, and nobody knows how a referendum would go. I rather despair at the tendency in politics only to support referendums if you think they're going to go your way. I mean, on an issue of this magnitude, it's right in principle to consult the people, and I've no idea how they will vote. But I'm a lot more bullish than those opinion polls would suggest. We joined the European Union and we voted to stay in 75 at the pit of our worst moment since the war. It was the days of the three-day week, constant strikes, power cuts. Now I just think we're past that. You know, we're the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world, depending on how you measure it. We are trapped in the only trade bloc on the planet that is shrinking. Every continent on Earth is experiencing economic growth except Europe. We're a trading people, a maritime nation. We should raise our eyes to more distant horizons and rediscover that global vocation that our fathers took for granted.
Are you surprised, just briefly, that George Osborne didn't tell the Prime Minister when he found out about this on Tuesday?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a couple of days. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. But I think that the principle here is outrageous. This is a surcharge on prosperity. And it's a basic rule that if you penalise successful nations in order to subsidise unsuccessful nations, you will end up with fewer successful nations and more unsuccessful nations. It is outrageous that we're effectively being clobbered here for having had the foresight to stay out of the euro, which is why our economy has recovered more quickly than the countries that surrendered their monetary policy, and why we're now being punished in order to subsidise them.
Daniel Hannan, thanks very much.